Howdy y'all, it's your favorite trainer with a belt buckle. Today we're going to help you pass any textbook certification within 7 days. NASM, ACE, ISSA. You came across the marketing companies before you came across the fitness companies. If you're not familiar with who I am, Chris Hitchko, I wrote the book, How to Become a Successful Personal Trainer. I'm at our beautiful Santa Monica location. We teach people how to become trainers in person, 2 months. LA, San Diego, also online. We have the best certification in fitness because you get to talk to fitness professionals, not AI or bots. And then you pass a textbook and you're like, how do I train people? Bro, relax. I've been working out for 10 years. I know how to train. Understanding the human body is way different than your body. And that's what we teach you at Show Up Fitness. How to program, how to assess people, how to grow a book of business. 90% of textbook trainers quit within the first year in the US, 18 months in the UK. But when you show up, we will give you the confidence to turn your passion for fitness into a career. Alrighty, so let's get into this. One of the most important things you need to understand to pass any textbook certification: orientation, planes of motion, concentric, eccentric actions for the movements. So let's start with planes of motion. An imaginary line bisecting the body into right and left halves. Flashcard that down. That's the sagittal plane of motion, allowing for flexion. Oh, bam! Flexion, extension. We got to look at the joints and what they're doing. Don't try to memorize, is it chest fly sagittal or is it transverse? Look at the actions. Look at the bone articulations and what is moving. So sagittal is front and back. Frontal, an imaginary line bisecting the body into anterior and posterior halves. Doing this. And then transverse is an imaginary line bisecting the body into superior and inferior halves. I'm going to show you 5 exercises for each, breaking down the agonist, synergist for your textbook certification, and then helping you understand orientation. Orientation is communicating with a doctor and they say something like anterior, lateral, medial, contraindication. You go, oh, what the hell did you just say? Not knowing the basics is what's going to separate you from all of the saturated market. The average trainer doesn't know that stuff, so you need to double down on it. Here's the anatomical position. This is the front side, which is called anterior, posterior. We have certain muscles or ligaments that will use that vocabulary. Anterior cruciate ligament. Cruciate in Latin means cross. Your ACL. You have a lateral on the outside. You have a medial. Bam! Look at that beautiful gastrocnemius lateral medial. You have a vastus medialis. Vastus lateralis. Distal means furthest away. Proximal, closest to the midline. This beautiful muscle right here, boom, 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 pectoralis major, originates on the sternum, inserts into your humerus. This is the most proximal, this is the most distal. Understanding concentric versus eccentric. Conshorten means shortening. 180 degrees, back to math. I know we suck at it. We've just flexed the elbow to 90. We've concentrically accelerated to 90 degrees. The biceps brachii does the majority of that work. There are other muscles. There's a lot of muscles in the human body, 650 plus. Bones are easier, 206. But when it comes to understanding the muscles for your test, they're not going to test you on a lot, but you need to understand the orientation, because when you're reading a question and they say anterior, medial, distal, ipsilateral, you're going, oh my God, I'm so confused. What do I do? And you choose the wrong answer. And then you complain and say, oh, that test was so hard. It's a test. We work with people. Here's the thing that really pisses me off doing this for 20 years, is we don't have the cognition to think and go, you know what? This is a trade where you work with people. Yet the entry standards, you take a test. Could you imagine? I'm a heart surgeon, haven't done anything, never worked on a heart before, but I read a lot of books. Who wants to start working with me? Oh my God. So you look at the industry and you're like, holy shit, There's no competition whatsoever because everyone does the same thing. If you go the other path, that's going to lead you down success. So double down on the basics. We need to work with our hands and observe movement and understand programming. That's what we teach you. You need to get through the basics for these tests. They're not going to quiz you on what does the brachioradialis do? What does the gastrocnemius do? No. They're going to ask you simple questions on orientation. Your client is performing a lunge. What plane of motion is that? Sagittal. Your client is performing a bicep curl. What plane of motion is that? Your client is performing a military press. What plane of motion is that? Frontal. Your client's performing a chest fly. What plane of motion is that? Transverse. So the vocabulary concentric means to shorten. Eccentric is to lengthen. Isometric means there's no movement at the joint. You're maintaining that position like a plank or a wall sit. These are great for strengthening the weak point. Also, if you have an injury, but we really need to understand the difference between concentric and eccentric. So when I'm doing a squat, this would be called like an offset squat with one dumbbell. You're coming up concentrically, that's when you want to breathe out. What's happening at the hip is extension. Your glutes are extending. At the knee, you have extension. So the quads are extending. When I do a squat, the agonist at the knee would be my quads. The agonist at the hip would be my glutes. Now, for most textbook certifications, they're going to wrongfully say that the hamstrings are the synergists. You just need to know that for that textbook. The stabilizing group for the lower body is your core. When I have a bunch of weight on my back, and I've been lifting for 5 years, I know what I'm doing. I take a big deep breath in to create intra-abdominal pressure. This stabilizes my lower back. My hips are still extending. My knees still extending. Agonist, synergist. The stabilizer would be my core. Now when I'm doing a push, the agonist would be my chest. Pectoralis major. The synergist would be my triceps because of elbow extension. You will also have the serratus anterior moving the scapula, protracting. Protraction. My scapula is coming off the back. My scapula is retracting, coming back. Most textbooks tell you there's 4 actions of the scapula. There's 8, but don't worry about that. They're not going to ask on stuff that's not in their textbook. They keep it simple. So then you go get a specialization. Do not get a specialization. No top trainer that I've talked to ever brags about their specializations. I have my corrective exercise and my PN1 and my FRC. No. Don't waste money on more textbooks. That's the cog in the system. Learn from people, seminars, mentorship, ask questions, get better at programming, all things that we will teach you, and that's why you're going to be successful. So let's go back and identify more exercise within these planes of motion. Flexion, extension, sagittal, bicep curl, tricep extension, plank, running, jumping properly, not like Tinkerbell. What are you doing? What are you doing? No, stop that. Load up by extending your humerus, and then you jump up by flexing your humerus. There's 5 checkpoints that most textbooks will talk about. Your ankle, your hip, your knee, the hip area is your LPHC, lumbopelvic hip complex, your shoulder, and your head. There's really 10. Think about it. 1, ankle, 2, knee, 3. You have the spine, 3 regions, lumbar, thoracic, cervical, shoulder, elbow, wrist, that's 9. And how you breathe is really important. You want to breathe out concentrically. Let me say that again. For your beginning clients, you want to breathe out concentrically. So if I'm doing a cable row, sagittal for extension, breathe in. The agonist, my latissimus dorsi. The synergist at the elbow, my biceps. My scapula is retracting. Think of when I row, I retract. When I press, I protract at the scapula. And then we're going to have frontal exercises like a lateral raise, single joint, just my medial, technically your lateral deltoid. One joint versus multi-joint when I do a squat. One joint, two joint. Woo, woo. One joint, two joint. That could be a song. One joint, two joint. Here we go. One joint, two joint. Two joints, more muscles. One joint, less. Frontal. Sagittal. Transverse. Rotating T's would be a multi-planar because you have sagittal, transverse, frontal. Rowing, sagittal. Pressing overhead, frontal. Lunging, sagittal. Running, jumping, all sagittal. We are sagittal creatures. When in doubt, go sagittal. When I do a push, if my elbows are tucked to the side, this would be sagittal. But if I'm out here in the horizon, like a bench press, it's technically multi-planar. Sagittal and transverse. This is the horizon, horizontal, adding to the midline. When you take away from the midline, that's abduction. But if it's in the transverse plane, it's horizontal abduction. Abduction, adduction, flexion, extension, horizontal adduction, horizontal abduction, transverse, external rotation, internal rotation, external rotation, internal rotation, transverse, internal rotation, external rotation. At the ankle, plantar flexion, dorsiflexion, knee flexion, knee extension. What muscles extend the knee? Quads. Which muscles flex the knee? The hamstrings. You just need to know the basic muscle groups. Quads, extend. Hamstrings, flex. Glutes, extend. Biceps, flex. Triceps, extend. Chest, push. Back, pull. Shoulders, push. Back, pull. They're going to keep it simple like that. You need to know the agonist, synergist, stabilizer. The other term is antagonist. The opposite. When I push overhead, the opposite would be pulling down. That would be my lats. The antagonist for a military press, latissimus dorsi. The agonist for a push-up is your chest. The antagonist would be doing a pronated row, which would emphasize your posterior deltoid. That would be your antagonist. Pronation, neutral, supination. Middle finger, oh, I'm just joking, calm down. Alternating. Holding a cup of soup. Pronation, neutral. Spotting at the wrists. Having a pronated grip. Arnold press, multi-plane of motion. All planes, sagittal, rotation, transverse, frontal. If we were to look at the 3 planes of motion again to review, hip flexion, knee extension, it's going to be sagittal. A crunch, a plank, all sagittal. Abduction, adduction, military press, pull up, lat pull down, side band walks, jumping jacks, frontal. Rotation is going to be transverse, chest fly, reverse fly. Understand the planes of motion, basic orientation, concentric and eccentric, isometric. You will pass your exam. We have a calendar to help you pass in 7 days, which include our audiobook. You're going to hear me talking how to pass this stuff. Study guide, live calls, quizzes. Get through this ASAP if you cannot get a refund. Your path for success is not more textbooks. It's asking the questions you have in your mind, working with clients who's a case example, and learning how to progress them so they get results. So retain them. So you get referrals. So you build a book of business. So you do what you want to have always done, which is help people. Textbooks are going to set you up for that path. You're not going to make it. learning from qualified professionals who've been doing this for 20 years, who have a team you can ask questions to. We have an app. We're online. Weekend seminars. If you want to become successful, all you got to do is show up.